One of the most endearing qualities of Jill is that she's basically the same person I knew at the University of Illinois. But what I knew was that she wanted to do something that made a difference in the world. She was a pioneer all the way down the line. The fact that she went to law school was because she wanted to deal with substantive issues. She was not afraid to take responsibilities, and that's an admirable quality in any person. Well, first of all, Watergate. That was not what she had anticipated when she went to work for the Justice Department. She was referred to as a girl. This highly educated, highly competent woman was a girl in the 1970s. And she held her own. She proved herself every time she opened her mouth. I'm very proud of who she is.
I was the number 2 and Jill was number 3 in seniority on what was then called the Watergate Task Force. And Jill's role was very important for the world to see. There were a number of folks who regarded her as different, and she had to endure that. And she did so with humility, and she never let anyone down. She was unfailingly honest and direct and capable. I think Jill was a star who others wanted to emulate in the profession. She did play a role as a trailblazer for women in the profession. She showed that she could do it, and she did it very well. Jill continued to be quite important in speaking truth to power, and that's really at the essence of who Jill is.
If you want change in this world, all you have to do is tell Jill Wine-Banks that it cannot be done. I choose Jill to walk in front of me and next to me in a constant fight for equality and fairness and democracy. She has learned lessons through extraordinary experience. General Counsel for the Army? Really? What did she do? She eliminated the WACs and made women a part of the Army. And when Jill Wine-Banks was asked to serve the Chicago public schools, what does she do? She identifies one of the greatest needs. They need to be excited about staying in school. She creates an entire vocational program. 50 years ago, Jill was fighting for freedom and choice. The choice of your life, the choice whether and when to have a baby. She has been fighting since the minute I met her so that others could have opportunities. She has effected lasting change.
To Jill, I'm a Girl Scout mentee that she met at a mentorship camp when I was 16 in Chicago. And now, 16 years later, I am the director of spiritual care for a Boston hospital. There's something about her that wants to help, and it's not just about her field, right? It's about the act of helping. I didn't have people telling me that I was extraordinary in any way. And then here was this woman who seemed so extraordinary. So it was like a spark that happened when I met her. And then the investment only got deeper more than anything else. Jill will be that person who saw me before I proved myself and cared about me and saw potential before I saw potential and wanted to open up her address book, wanted to open up her home, wanted to open up her contacts, her experiences, to ensure that I had a shot to be great and to have a life that I loved and to help others.
Well, that was an amazing film. Definitely touched me. Thank you to all of you who spoke there. I'm really honored to join this group of distinguished people who have won this award. The past winners, my current colleagues, it is a great honor. And it's really amazing that for the last 32 years, the ABA has shown its recognition of women in the practice. It's an organization that was founded 145 years ago as an all-male organization. It took them another 40 years to admit women to the association. I graduated law school 50 years after that, and unfortunately, not much had changed in those years. When I graduated, only 4% of all lawyers were women, and none of them were litigators. So I was really taking on quite a challenge at that time. When I started at Columbia, my fellow classmates said, someone's going to die in Vietnam because you took their rightful place in this class, and you'll never practice law anyway. And in job interviews, I was asked what kind of birth control I used, how many children I would have. And I have a bathroom story that I wasn't going to tell, but Deborah, you inspired me. When I took the bar exam, I walked into the room, and it was all women. I knew that couldn't be a coincidence. There were only 4% of most classes were women, so how could it be? So I asked the bar examiner, who told me it was because there were no women's bathrooms and they had to create one next to the room that we were in, and they didn't want us to have to walk great distances, so they put us all in one room. A year or two later, a woman named Karen DeCrow, who wrote a book called Sexist Justice, had the same experience. And she asked the bar examiner, who told her it would be too disruptive to the men to have women in the classroom with them, so we were segregated out. But it didn't end with job interviews. It didn't end with the bar exam. When I entered a courtroom, I was always asked whose secretary I was. And of course, I had to endure sexist comments, some of which were unfortunately nationally publicized during the Watergate trial, when actually during the tapes hearing, I was cross-examining Rosemary Woods, and Judge Sirica interrupted with, "Now, ladies, we have enough problem in the courtroom without two women arguing." It was a good cross-examination. It wasn't a catfight. Then when I was cross-examining one of the defendants, and this one was one where we had debated whether I could question him because we wanted to show what a hot-headed, nasty person he was, but we were afraid that male chauvinism would stand in the way and he would never fight back with me. But we knew that if he argued with Rick or Jim, who were the other two lawyers on the team, that it would have no impact. If I could get him to yell at me, it would have an impact. And so we wouldn't lose anything if I failed, but if I could win, it would be good. So I got him going pretty fast. And then Judge Sirica said, "Mr. Mardian, don't you know you can never win an argument with a lady?" So that ended my good cross-examination because his lawyer jumped up and said, "I need a recess, Your Honor." And every lawyer in the courtroom ran up to him and said, "The jury hates you. You have to stop this. You cannot yell at her." So that's not really surprising because there were no laws at the time to protect us. There was no EEOC. That didn't exist when I started practicing law. There wasn't a Ms. Magazine. There wasn't a women's movement. And why would there be? We weren't in the Constitution. Oh, wait, we still aren't. That's why I continue to work for the Equal Rights Amendment, and why I ask all of you, the ABA, the Women's Commission, to try to make this become the 28th Amendment to our Constitution. We need it. Recent decisions of the Supreme Court certainly show how much we need it. So take that on. We will never be equal, let alone women of achievement, as the Margaret Brent Award says, if we aren't part of the Constitution. And in fact, if there were gender equity and equality, the Margaret Brent Award would be the Margaret Brent Award for Lawyers of Achievement, not for women lawyers of achievement. I look forward to that day. And don't get me wrong, women have come a long way. We are much better off now than when I graduated law school. But women are still not equal. And so I have 4 sort of hard-won lessons that I want to share with you today that I want to pass on. First is, in order to fight the discrimination that women in the law face, you must be aware of it. You have to acknowledge that it exists. The statistics and Dobbs prove that it is still rampant. So even when we're in open display as it was when I was practicing, because it wasn't illegal so people could do it openly, it still took me a year to realize that I was being discriminated against. And it took me that long to realize that the men I started with at the Department of Justice, we all started handling appeals. And then they moved on to trials, and I was hired as a trial lawyer. But, okay, so now the men are trying cases, and I suddenly realized I'm still handling appeals. So I had to do something about it. But I didn't have any peers. I had no other women around to ask what to do, and so I decided that I had to recognize it and I had to act on it. And so I did. I went to my boss and I said, how come I'm not trying cases? And he said, well, because you're a girl. And you'd be, in a courtroom for appeals, it's just lawyers. But you're in the organized crime section. It would be the mafia in the courtroom with you, and you'd be so much more dangerously if you were there. And I said, well, you hired me as a trial lawyer, and I want a trial. That's how I got my first, was sort of direct confrontation. But the second lesson that I want to pass on is once you see it, you have to act on it. And as I said, at Justice, I used direct confrontation. I did the same thing with Richard Benvenisa, whose voice you heard there. When we were starting the tapes hearing, I felt he was taking more witnesses than his fair share. And so I called him out into the hallway and said, Rick, I'm taking the next witness, and I'm going to take every other witness after that. We're sharing equally. And he went, oh, okay, yes, okay. The next witness the White House called was Rosemary Woods. So that's how she became my witness in that case. And confrontation is not always the right solution, so I want to pass on a couple of other tactics that I've used. It's not always necessary, and it's certainly not always effective. Sometimes humor and a light touch is a better way. When I got to Motorola as a senior officer, I realized that they were having senior staff meetings, and I wasn't invited. So I went to my boss, and instead of direct confrontation, I said, guess you forgot to amend the invite list for senior staff meetings when you hired me for senior staff. And he at first said, well, no, the guys aren't ready to have a woman at these meetings. And this is not that long ago. And I said, well, what are you doing to help change that? I made him my ally. And soon thereafter, I was at those meetings. And sometimes you have to ignore the slight. You can't make a federal case out of everything. And sometimes the best way to achieve your results, and this one I think may surprise some of you, is to sort of step back and put a man in front of you. We mentioned eliminating the Women's Army Corps. And to do that and not have it be a woman's issue, I enlisted the help of the Assistant Secretary for Personnel to make him the front person. I did the work, I gave him the materials, but in order to get it to be a personnel issue, a human resources issue, not a woman's issue, I needed his front piece. And that's how we got it done. And it really worked. The third lesson is that you have to embrace challenges. You have to take calculated risks. You have to speak up. That's what it takes to succeed. Actively pursue leadership in your law firms, in your professional organizations, in corporate boards, wherever you happen to be in your life. Seize the opportunities that come your way and create opportunities for yourself and for others. Challenges are not deterrents. They are catalysts for growth. Earn and confidently occupy your rightful place at the big table. My parents raised me to think that I could do anything I wanted to do, and it empowered me to act on that belief. So despite the social limitations and pressures and the stereotypes that held me back, I took calculated risks. I mean, going to law school back then was a big risk. Becoming a litigator was an even bigger risk. Everything I did, going into the Pentagon, where I honestly wouldn't have recognized a general when I first got there because I didn't know any generals, doing a personal memoir that had things in it that my friends all said, oh, please don't go there, you shouldn't reveal all that. All of those were risks, but they were worth it. They led me to where I am today, and I was a shy girl from Skokie, and if I can do it, so can everyone here. Now, my fourth and final lesson is that success is when you are the first, but you are not the last. Open doors for other women, and today's pin is a phone booth, and the door opens and reveals Superwoman inside. It was gifted to me. I get most of my pins nowadays from fans. When the Secretary of the Interior built a phone booth in his office because he didn't want to have to walk to a SCIF to see confidential information, a lesson that I guess his boss never learned either. And I didn't realize that the door opened. I just used it because it was a phone booth. And when I went to take it off after wearing it on television, as I was taking it off, the door opened, and lo and behold, there was that super one. So, fabulous. So, just keep working to open doors for other women. I think that's what this award is all about, is opening doors, empowering other women, overcoming stereotypes. Don't let gender ever define your legal prowess. We are not lady lawyers. It's one of the only terms that still gets my goat. We are lawyers, and we should be very proud of that. You may have to dance backwards in high heels or click Dorothy's red shoes, two other pins I considered wearing, and Deborah was advising me on that. You may have to be twice as good as any man to be considered half as good, or to get the same pay as they do. But women can do anything as long as we are not blinded by stereotypes or held back by any artificial things that we either internalize or just accept. So I want to end by just once again thanking the ABA for all that they have done, for the Commission on Women, for this honor, and for all the important work and studies they have done. Special thanks to Michelle Thorne, who is here with me today. She is the one who nominated me. And to Laurel Bellows, who's also in the front row, who is a past winner and who is one of my supporters. And I think Dennis Archer may be here, who was another supporter, and Mary Smith. I want to thank them. And one who isn't here, but whose picture has been in several of our stories, who was a real, and by the way, this is filled with shattered glass. If you haven't noticed that, it's because we've all had a role in shattering glass ceilings. And one of the biggest glass ceilings was Hillary Clinton, who of course has inspired me, and it was a great honor that she was one of the people writing a supporting letter for me. But also Amy Eggert, if you're still in the room, I'm not sure you are, but it's probably the best thing I ever did for the ABA was to bring Amy Eggert with me. Anybody who's ever worked at the ABA knows that that's a great contribution. And I also want to thank my goddaughter, my grand-goddaughter, Lena, who is here with me today, who inspires me every day, and to two of my cousins who bring me great joy every day. Jennifer and Lauren are here with me today. Thank you very much. And although he's not here, of course, I can't make the mistake that we shouldn't make. I'm thanking my husband of 43 years, who has let me do all these crazy things that I do and has accepted all this nonsense that I do. But before I close, I have to divert to one subject that wasn't supposed to be in this speech, but recent events have made me say that I've become a very passionate supporter of cameras in the courtroom. So while you're fighting for the Equal Rights Amendment, for gender equality, please all take seriously how important it is that we have cameras in the courtroom. We are all victims of the election crimes committed by the former president, or alleged to be committed. And the Department of Justice's and the special prosecutor's indictment says that we are the victims. Victims have a right to see the trial. And so I hope that there will be some action taken to get cameras in all courtrooms. And with that, I just want to thank you again for this award and for everything that everyone in this room has done to open doors for other women and to achieve equality for all of us. I was very inspired yesterday by Fred Gray, and his last remarks were so amazing. I was very moved when he said, "We've come a long way, but the fight isn't over." And when he related that John Lewis on his deathbed said to him, "Keep pushing." I will, I hope you will too. Thank you very much.